Honestly, Sarah, I'm thrilled with how this case highlights the judicial efficiency we've been striving for.
Welcome to this video on the finality of guilt, where we unpack the Supreme Court case of Timmerman, VR 2026, NZSC 53, and examine the limits of judicial rationality in Aotearoa. We are weighing systemic finality against human vulnerability. On one side is the sanctity of the plea, the state's need for efficiency. On the other is the vulnerability of the accused, representing the biological and psychological reality of defendants under extreme duress. The case began on March 10, 2020, with Timmerman's arrest. A police search led to the discovery and seizure of prohibited firearms, magazines, and ammunition. He was subsequently charged with 8 offenses under the Arms Act 1983 and other charges. Cornelis Timmerman's clinical reality included severe post-traumatic stress disorder, 2 documented suicide attempts in 2020, and severe, ongoing cardiac issues requiring surgical intervention. This medical crisis occurred while he was in initial remand and facing criminal charges. The trial timeline collapsed due to COVID-19 restrictions. The case was transferred to the High Court in May 2021, and the jury trial was indefinitely vacated in November 2021. For a healthy defendant, this is an administrative hurdle, but for Timmerman, it was acute psychological duress. Faced with indefinite delay, Timmerman pleaded guilty in December 2021 to secure finality. He was sentenced to 9 months supervision, but maintained his innocence. Remarkably, his co-defendant Simonsen went to trial in 2024 on the same facts and was fully acquitted of all but one charge. Timmerman sought leave to appeal to the Supreme Court, which was dismissed on May 8, 2026. The court justified the ruling by stating that the delay was not exceptional and that Timmerman's decision to plead guilty was rational and informed. The court's decision centered on the, quote, exceptionality trap. It ruled that Timmerman's compound duress, PTSD, heart failure, and indefinite adjournment did not meet the absolute threshold required to revoke a guilty plea. The generative evaluation model audit highlights the jurisdictional gatekeeping in 2026. While compliance with higher legal hierarchy was met, the appeal failed the statutory gate, meaning it did not involve a matter of general or public importance. The case fell short of the, quote, interests of justice threshold. When evaluating the ethics of finality, an AI ethics judge scorecard reveals high scores for legality, integrity, and legal ethics. However, the moral compass score is moderate, reflecting the tension where the court acknowledged Timmerman's suffering but prioritized systemic finality. The case highlights a shift toward the proportionality paradigm via the High Court Amendment Rules 2026. This new objective prioritizes resolving disputes by strict proportionate means, overriding the legacy model of, quote, just, speedy, and inexpensive resolution. There is an asymmetry in legal timeframes. Civil and minor criminal offenses have limitation periods. However, serious firearms charges, like those Timmerman faced, have no limitation period, leaving him trapped in an indefinite prosecution loop from which civil defendants are protected. The system defends against mere stress to maintain stability. The 2 points of structural stress are the resource threat and the predictability mandate. Lowering the threshold for exceptionality would risk overwhelming the courts and sacrificing collective stability for individual relief. We must consider the cost of administrative convenience. Is it ethical to deny justice based on the floodgates fallacy? The indefinite delay was framed as not exceptional, but for a vulnerable person like Timmerman, it was a lethal threat, revealing the true definition of duress. The court's ruling assumes rationality can be separated from physical health. However, under clinical duress, the brain prioritizes survival over legal truth. Challenging the assumption of rationality reveals that Timmerman's plea was likely an act of biological necessity to end the stress. The coercion of the sentence indication presents a stark choice: maintain innocence and risk death from health issues during an indefinite wait, or falsely accept guilt for immediate survival and a light sentence. The insight is that this is a biological hostage situation, not a voluntary legal strategy. The 2026 political collision course is framed by the irony of the charge. Timmerman was charged under the 1983 Arms Act, which is now the central battleground of New Zealand politics, highlighting a deep disconnect between judicial rigidity and legislative shifting. Diagnosing the firearms policy war shows 4 political factions: ACT and National push to repeal and replace the 1983 Act. Labor resists, defending strict laws. NZ First seeks common sense reform, and the Greens push for total restriction with stricter storage and mental health red flags. Timmerman VR is the ultimate case study of an efficient judicial system, which has become faster, stricter, and mathematically predictable. However, the price of this administrative efficiency is borne entirely by the system's most biologically and psychologically vulnerable citizens. This leaves us with the unanswerable question. If we lower the threshold to protect the vulnerable, do we make it impossible for the state to accept a plea? Where do we draw the line between a functioning court and a forced confession?
Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this, make sure to like and follow and hit subscribe for more great content. Thanks for watching.